everybody. I'm Dan Murrell coming at you on this July 4th. Here in America, it's known as Independence Day, and around the rest of the world, it's known as 4 July. July 4th is a big celebration here in the United States, but it also means that we have reached the halfway point of the year, believe it or not. So it's time to check in on the movies of 2025 and for me to name what I think are the 10 best movies, or at least my 10 favorite movies of the year so far. Now, as always, I don't get to watch every single movie that comes out, especially some of the smaller releases that never really make it to my market. So it's possible there's a movie I haven't seen yet that would be on this list, but I did the best that I could. So I'm going to give you my 10 favorites, as well as, after my list, the critics' highest rated movies of the year so far. Before we get to my top 10 though, I just wanted to acknowledge a few movies that didn't quite make my list. They were all movies that I enjoyed, but they just didn't make the cut. One of them is 28 Years Later, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's latest installment in a franchise that's now spanned over 2 decades. I liked the movie. I had some issues with it. A lot of people had many more issues with it than I did. Black Bag was a movie that came very close to making the list. I didn't catch it in theaters, but I did watch it at home, and I think it's a pretty nifty spy thriller. It wasn't quite my speed overall, but I think that the performances were great. I was engaged in the plot. I like a good spy work movie or spycraft movie, and I think that Black Bag did that very well. Companion is another movie that I enjoyed this year. I wouldn't say it was close to making the top 10, but I did want to mention it because even though the twist was largely spoiled in the trailers for some reason, I still found it engaging and full of good performances. EFUS is a movie that's been making a lot of top 10 lists. It's a very small movie. It's what you might call a hangout movie. It's about 2 teams of middle-aged baseball players who are playing their last rec league game before the city shuts down their field. It is very meditative. It is not the fastest movie in the world, but I think that it ends up in the right place, and I gave it a lot of consideration for my top 10. The Life of Chuck is a movie that won the Toronto International Film Festival People's Choice Award last year, which usually bodes well for its Oscar chances. I don't know if it's quite going to make it there. I found parts of the movie to be very engaging, very emotional. I just thought that it was a bit scattered. It was a bit too scattershot for it to be on my top 10 list. One of Them Days is a comedy from early this year that I very much enjoyed, and I was glad that it found some box office success. It's one of those movies that I don't think many people are going to remember, even at the end of the year. Maybe a lot of people don't remember now, but that I think is very funny and worth your time. Predator: Killer of Killers was actually on my top 10 list. It got bumped off by a last-minute addition, and the reason it did is because I think that it hits a few snags in the third act, but even though I didn't quite gel with the animation style, I found the actual content, the action, and everything else pretty cool on this movie, and I think that it is a great entry into the Predator franchise. One movie I haven't heard many people talking about is called The Rule of Jenny Penn, which is from New Zealand. It stars John Lithgow and Jeffrey Rush as 2 men in a senior living facility who engage in psychological warfare. This is a movie I just took a flyer on and decided to go see one afternoon, and I'm glad that I did. It features a great performance from John Lithgow and a great performance from Jeffrey Rush, and if you're looking for a very off-kilter, off-beat movie, this is a good one to seek out. And finally, Thunderbolts, I think, deserves a mention. It was a very atypical MCU film, didn't find a lot of success at the box office, but it was the first Marvel film in a while that I thought had a lot more going on besides setting up later movies or having to pay off characters that they set up in previous movies. And I think that that kind of ambition should be rewarded. That brings us now to my top 10 favorite movies of the year so far, and I'm presenting these in alphabetical order because I don't want to be held to an order at the end of the year if any of these movies do end up making my final top 10. And so alphabetically, the first film on my list is a very small movie called The Ballad of Wallace Island, which is streaming now on Peacock. It's also available for digital rental and available on physical media. It was written by and stars Tom Basden and Tim Key, who I just became familiar with through the Taskmaster series. Basden plays semi-washed-up musician Herb McGuire, who shows up for a private gig that turns out to be just for his #1 fan, who's played by Tim Key, a lottery winner, who also brings in Herb's former partner in music and life, Nell Mortimer, played by Carey Mulligan. I like British humor, and this movie definitely leans into that office style cringe slash awkward sensibility at first. But the characters in this movie are unpeeled slowly as the movie progresses, and there is so much more to each one of them than it first appears. So you get some laughs, you get some genuine heartache. It's sad in places, it's happy and hopeful in other places. This movie really, really reached me at the particular place where I am in my life right now. And I think it is in strong contention for still being on my top 10 list at the end of the year. Next up is Bring Her Back, which is mostly out of theaters, but currently available for purchase and for premium video on demand rental. This is Danny and Michael Philippous's follow-up to Talk to Me, and it is one of the most disturbing horror movies that I've seen in a long time. Some people agree with that, some people disagree. But I think something that everyone can agree on is that Sally Hawkins is amazing in this film as a foster mother who brings two kids into her home, only for those kids to find out that there is a lot more going on than anybody really knows about. This has psychological horror, it has body horror, it has just about every type of horror that you can imagine. And, I used to not be a big fan of the horror genre. I've seen a lot more over the past 10 years or so, and it's gotten harder and harder to unnerve me. But Bring Her Back unnerved me more than just about any horror movie that I've seen in a very long time. If you remember my review, I compared it favorably to Hereditary, which is high praise for me. And if you've got the stomach for it, if you don't mind psychological horror, maybe you won't be bothered as much by it as I was, then you should go find Bring Her Back. Next up is Pixar's latest film, Elio, which is currently taking a beating in the theatrical market. Many people were not that impressed by this one, but I really, really was. I thought it was a very cool story. I liked the sci-fi aesthetic of it, the Spielberg 80s Amblin aesthetic of it. Maybe it's because that's referential to when I was growing up and the movies that I liked, but I didn't find it to be just another generic Pixar film as many people did. I thought that it was a really fun space adventure, something that adults and kids can enjoy. I liked what the message of the movie was about fitting in and finding your place in the world. I thoroughly enjoyed Elio, and it seems like I'm a bit of an outlier on how much I like that film, but that's what I like about movies and naming your favorites. I'm not here to name a consensus list. I'm here to name my 10 favorite movies, and Elio was definitely one of them so far. Next up is Friendship, which was released by A24 and stars Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd as two neighbors who probably shouldn't be friends to begin with. I am a fan of the absurd when it comes to comedy. I'm a big fan of I Think You Should Leave, which is Tim Robinson's Netflix show. And that same sensibility was brought over to this film. I think it's hilarious that it's not written by anybody who worked on I Think You Should Leave. They just basically wrote this script for Tim Robinson and said, only you can play this part. And that is correct. I don't see anybody else but Tim Robinson playing the role that he does in this movie. This is definitely going to be a polarizing one. Some of the movies that are on my list I think are pretty safe for just about anybody to watch. This one is one that you have to basically give your friends a questionnaire to fill out before you decide whether or not you want to watch it with them, because this will be anti-comedy to some people, and it's intended to be anti-comedy in some ways, but it's definitely comedy no matter what sort that I found funny, and I was glad that I wasn't disappointed by this or that they didn't water down what makes Tim Robinson funny, which is this kind of fearless, take no prisoners style, and all of that is present in the film. Next up is the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon. A lot of people are down on these live-action remakes of animated films, and I usually am, but I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It probably helps that I was not a diehard fan of the original movie. I liked it. There was nothing bad about it. But to me, this live-action version carried over what was good about the animated film and then combined it with some great cinematography. They brought over John Powell's score, which was already amazing. I thought that the acting was good. And again, because I'm not so committed to the original and didn't have every single beat memorized, the changes that were made didn't really bother me. I'm not saying that this should replace the original animated film. And like many of the other movies on my list, there are a lot of people that are way further down on this film than I am. But I thought that it was a thrilling adventure that I loved watching in IMAX. I thought it used the IMAX aspect ratio very, very well. And it was one of those movies that I just walked out saying, yeah, you know what? I liked that. And I don't really have any notes. I just thought it was a really fun, entertaining movie. Next up is a latecomer to this list. It's the Netflix original animated film K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, if you watch Charts with Dan, you'll know that there are often K-pop concert films that pop up either in the top 10 or as one of the biggest limited releases of the week. And I say often that, of course, when I'm referencing those movies, I never have to look up any of the names or have not recognized what any of these groups are or who any of these artists are, because I am so plugged into the youth culture of today, and I definitely know all of this K-pop stuff. So I didn't miss it when it first came out because I don't really know anything about K-pop, or it didn't really appeal to me because I'm not super into K-pop like all of the other really hip young people are. It just wasn't on my radar for some reason, but I have many of you to thank for getting me to watch it because I kept seeing people reference it in the comments. This film's from Sony Pictures Animation, using the same animation company who heavily contributed to the Spider-Verse film. So the movie looks great. It's about a K-pop girl group called Huntrix who's tasked with protecting the world from demons through their music and also fighting the demons directly. But the demons fight back with the Saja Boys, a K-pop boy band who sets out to steal their fans. I thought the animation was really well done in this, and when you look at the company who did it and their pedigree and the movies they've worked on before, that's not really a surprise. It was also a funny movie. It does skew young, and I think even younger than, teenagers. I think kids could watch this film and enjoy it. But I thought that it was also cute and entertaining and had some jokes that made me laugh. And the music in this movie is great. I mean, I listen to a lot of K-pop anyway, but let's pretend that I don't, and this was maybe the biggest exposure I've had so far to that particular genre of music. They were all catchy songs. They were paired with really good visuals. And again, it's one of those animated movies that has a message to it, but it's not obvious. It's not slapping you in the face. It's tied into the plot. I'm not sure what the eligibility for K-pop Demon Hunters is going to be as far as the Oscars and animated features. I don't know if it's being given a theatrical release to make it eligible, but if it is, it should be on the short list. And it's a quick watch. It's only about 90 minutes. Again, you get great music, great animation. I think it's a great story. It's something the whole family can watch. And it was really kind of an easy thing to put it on my list. It took the spot of Predator Killer of Killers because I thought that the movie altogether was more solid. And I'm glad. Thank you to everybody that recommended that I should watch it, because here it is on my list of my 10 favorites so far this year. Next up is a movie that made its debut at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year. It's called Sorry Baby, and it was my personal favorite of the films that I watched virtually. It's written, directed by, and stars Eva Victor, who plays Agnes, a college professor who's grappling with trauma from her past. The story plays out non-linearly, so we see the aftermath first, and then eventually we get closer and closer to the event itself. And this is a movie that has to juggle a lot of different tones, but it is, in many ways, one of the funnier movies that I've seen this year. They draw humor from darkness, they draw humor from absurdity, but it also really packs a punch. And the ending scene is one of my favorite ending scenes in a movie in a very long time. This one just barely was eligible for the list because my rule is that to be on this list, it had to have been released in the first half of the year, not just premiered at a film festival early in the year. Sorry Baby just went into limited release, but it's going to be expanding over the next few weeks. So keep an eye on your local showtimes, because if it is showing in a theater near you in, let's say, a week or two, this is one of my favorite films. And again, I think a contender to still be on this list at the end of the year. This next movie is probably no surprise. It is probably the closest we have to a consensus pick for the best of the year so far, and that is Sinners from Ryan Coogler, which actually debuts streaming on Max today and will be on physical media next Tuesday. I did 2 reviews of Sinners on my channel, one before it came out and then a spoiler review that pretty much contained all my thoughts. And this movie has been talked about so much that if you want to know what I loved and there wasn't much that I didn't love about the movie, you can check out my previous reviews. But Ryan Coogler really, I think, has a handle on the cinematic language. When we talk about the IMAX aspect ratio, How to Train Your Dragon used it really well. Sinners, I think, used it exceptionally well. It's got one of my favorite sequences of the year. some great performances. And for horror fans, it had the gore. I don't personally think that it was boring or had too few of the monsters, the movie monsters that feature in the film. I think that it was kind of a perfect balance of a drama and a monster movie. This one is another one that it's going to be hard for me to get to the end of the year and not have Sinners on my top 10 list. And when you look back at the first half of this year, it's been interesting because there have been a lot of good movies, but not as many that you look to the end of the year and say, oh, that movie is going to be in contention for some major awards. Sinners is the one that I think I can safely say is going to be a major contender at the Academy Awards. We don't know what other movies are going to come out this year, so I'm not going to say, oh, it's a lock for it to be a Best Picture nominee, because there could be 9 or 10 other great movies that we haven't seen yet. But of the movies that have come out in the first 6 months, Sinners is by far the front runner in that regard. And I wouldn't be shocked if it is nominated for multiple awards as we get to the end of this year and going into the Oscars in 2026. Finally on my list is Warfare, which was co-directed by Alex Garland along with Ray Mendoza, and it is one of the most visceral portrayals of war. It basically unfolds in real time that I can remember seeing. It's constructed from the memories of Ray Mendoza as well as those who were involved in the incident depicted in the film. There were a lot of people that pushed back on this movie when I initially reviewed it because of everything else that surrounds the war in Iraq. And there has been a lot of debate in this country about that war in the 2 decades since it began. But that doesn't change for me the movie itself and how it depicts the situation that these soldiers are in. I think that it is really, really gripping filmmaking. And it's a movie that also really takes advantage of how overwhelming cinema can be if you see it on a big screen with state-of-the-art sound, the use of sound, the way that the movie is shot. It really does make you feel like you are there. And whether it ends up making my final top 10 list or not, I think as a theater-going experience, it is absolutely going to be one of my most memorable of 2025. So those are my picks for the best movies of 2025 so far, but what does the critical world at large say? Well, to find out, I went to Rotten Tomatoes, and I have to thank the person that made the plugin for my web browser that can now show you the average score that critics give a movie, since Rotten Tomatoes has removed that from their site altogether. These are the movies that have the highest critical rating, not just fresh or rotten, so far this year. First of all, looking at all movies released, Sinners is tops with an average score of 8.8 out of 10 from critics. Sorry Baby is close behind with an 8.6 out of 10. Next is Unbecoming a Guinea Fowl, which has an average critical rating of 8.4 out of 10. I haven't had a chance to see this one yet. It's from Zambian writer-director Rungano Nyoni about a group of women trying to solve a mystery in the aftermath of a death in their family. With a score of 8.2, Blur to the End is one of the most acclaimed movies of the year. It's a documentary about the reunion of the English band Blur, probably best known in the US for their hit Song 2 in 1997. Next, also with a score of 8.2 out of 10, is Familiar Touch from writer-director Sarah Friedland about an elderly woman adjusting to life in a nursing home. The documentary Marley Matlin, Not Alone Anymore, also has an 8.2 out of 10. That one debuted at Sundance, and I've heard great things about it. Another documentary is next up with an 8.1 out of 10. It's called Pavements. It's a non-traditional documentary about the indie rock band Pavement. Then we have Black Bag, which has an 8.1 out of 10. Critics really liked this movie, and I enjoyed it, but a lot of critics liked it much more than I did, many calling it a return to form for Steven Soderbergh. With an 8 out of 10, Tatami is also one of the most acclaimed movies of the year. It's a film about an Iranian judo champion who's told to withdraw from a championship match when she's matched with an Israeli fighter. Then with 8 out of 10, we have Ephus, which was very close to making my list, and The Ballad of Wallace Island, which did make my list. That one also has an 8 out of 10. Those are the most acclaimed movies by critics so far this year when you talk about all releases. When you narrow that down to movies that got wide releases or releases on streaming, there's some overlap, but some other movies that weren't on the previous list. But Sinners still takes the #1 spot when you talk about movies in wide release with an 8.8 out of 10. Black Bag is second with an 8.1 out of 10. Then we have a documentary called My Mom Jane, which is streaming on Max. It has a critical rating of 8 out of 10. It's a documentary by Law & Order actress Mariska Hargitay about her mother, Jane Mansfield, who died when she was very young. Warfare is on this list with a 7.9 out of 10, and K-pop Demon Hunters is also on the list at 7.8 out of 10. Predator Killer of Killers makes the list at 7.7 out of 10, followed by The Life of Chuck at 7.6 out of 10. And then 3 movies that got an average score of 7.5 out of 10 from critics: Friendship, which was on my list, Companion, which almost made my list, and Bring Her Back, which also was on my list. So those are both my top movies of 2025 so far and the critics' top movies of the year. But what are yours? Let me know down in the comments below, and be sure to stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. If you're celebrating this July 4th, be sure to celebrate safely, and I'll see you right back here after the holiday. Bye.